Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. Next week I will be at PAX Boston, so first and foremost I hope to meet as many of you as I can there, and also I'm pretty positive I'll still be able to do the Q&A next week. I'm just going to have to do it later Wednesday night or early Thursday morning, so if you have any questions you need to get in for next week, please ask them on the sooner side. Sorry about that, but you know how scheduling goes. But let's jump in and see what we got this week. Arnliot was chiming in again on Floatplane about last week's issue with the Barco monitor that had an image that wouldn't fill the whole screen, and it seems like it might just be an issue with the way the Amiga in computer mode works with the later OS, or the earlier OSs. So I guess they said they're going to have an analog DAC on the way for the Super NT, and you'll be able to kind of check out if that's any difference, but unfortunately, I guess some of these monitors are just going to have a smaller screen area. I wish I could offer more. I just have never seen one of those Barco ones in person, and if I ever get any information, I'll try to remember to post about it, but this might just be one of those situations where you have to deal with the exact monitor you have and kind of figure out a solution from there. So, sorry I don't have anything else to add. And I think I got your name right. Thanks for the description. Bastion just said they watch all of these videos on a 4K OLED TV. Nice. And they could see a large difference between Floatplane and YouTube. Would I be willing to upload all videos to Floatplane? And when am I going to upgrade to 4K? So a couple of cool things in there. First of all, yes, my plan is to upload every single video I do to Floatplane as well, for two reasons. One is the quality difference, but also I like to put these up earlier for supporters. Sometimes that's half a day, sometimes it's a week earlier, but mostly I just think it's a fun little gesture. And I realize that most people are just going to wait till it's on a public service anyway, because it's sometimes easier to consume. I still think it's a fun little thing to do. So yes, everything's going on Floatplane, and hopefully early. As far as when am I upgrading to 4K, I actually am and have been in 4K for a while, but the weekly videos, so this Q&A and the weekly roundup, I'm sticking to 1080p for the near future, because 4K doesn't require double the power, it requires 4 times the power as 1080p, so everything's harder, more disk space, takes longer to edit, way longer to render, longer to upload. I mean, everything is harder. And let's face it, I'm no model, so you don't really need to see me in 4K. However, all of the fancier videos are shot with a GH5 Lumix camera that is true 4K 60. And while very often I'll still use this camera, the Sony a6300 for the me shots, on the way my workflow is today, the me shots are usually 1080p scaled, and everything else is 4K. So all the captures are truly scaled to 4K. All of those shots of the camera on a TV are 4K, and I think those are really a great way to demonstrate real life differences, because it's so easy to do a perfect capture and then upload it, and if somebody's watching on their phone, the capture kind of gets all messed up. So if you're watching on a TV, at least you'll be able to see what my eyes are seeing mostly on my second LCD TV. So it's a really great realistic expectation for anybody that wants to see those comparisons, and those are shot in 4K 60. So for any of the fancier stuff, always going to be 4K from now on, unless there's some weird issue or anything. And for the weeklies, I'm just sticking with 1080p, because just why not? But great questions, and awesome TV. Moving over to Patreon, Jake Scott said they remember me mentioning someone who recapped an XM29 Plus. They plan to do the same in the near future with a few friends, and was wondering if I had a Caplist. No, and that's something I really hope is implemented in the wiki pretty much the moment it goes live, is a cap creation tool. I think we know enough web developers out there that once the wiki's open to more devs, we'll be able to implement something like that. So not only do you do the cap list, make sure you do it for the exact revision number board that you're using, not just XM29 Plus. And on top of all of that, I'd love to integrate something like an Octopart finder in there, so that you could actually click on the link to the cap that you need and it'll find it for you somewhere, as well as offer replacements and alternatives if they're out of stock. So no, but it's something I hope catches on, because it won't just help everybody else, it'll also help you, because it'll be a nice easy to use interface, not just like a pencil and scratch paper or something like that, or an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm working on that. Also, you're looking to replace those loud-ass fans but are unsure of which to use. I don't think it's as easy as matching specs to a Noctua. Now, in all honesty, I vaguely remember somebody trying this, and the monitor didn't turn on with a different fan because it sent some kind of signal saying dead fan. So you just have to replace it with the same fan type. Now, I'm doing this all from memory, and I can't remember where I was talking to somebody about this, but it was a reputable source. I'm sorry for being so vague, but you can replace the fans. Just remember that it's the same type. So, if it's the 3-wire fan that has a signal wire going back to it, I would just look into those. But other than that, just pick the same size, and you should be able to have a much quieter fan that'll last forever. Because remember, anything with moving parts is eventually going to die. So, good questions. Sorry that my answers are mostly I don't know or it's coming, but me, I'm always honest with everybody. So, thanks for asking. And wanted to know if there's a way to get my supporter video or audio content as an RSS feed. Looks like Patreon supports it for audio, but not any of my other platforms. So here's the thing. There's two answers to this. First of all, there's going to be a whole bunch of changes coming up in a couple of months, all positive, I hope. But I will absolutely be readdressing the way I do some of these Q&As. And I'm pretty sure it's still going to be weekly. It's still going to be the same setup. But I want to try to make content easier for everybody just like this. To answer your direct question, though, Patreon is... as far as I know, is either or. You could either do an audio upload or a video. It won't let you do both. I think Floatplane might just be video only for now. And if so, I don't think it'll let you do both. So what I have been doing is just uploading an MP3 right to Retro RGB and linking to it in the description. And if you click on that, even from your phone, you'll be able to listen as if it was a normal podcast. You would have to proactively then go click on it. It won't just show up in a feed. But that's the temporary solution for now. So videos linked wherever you support, and in that same video description is a link to an MP3, 128K compressed, so you don't have to worry about killing your streaming or your data plans if you're doing it from your phone. And that's going to be the short term, but by summertime, hopefully everything will have been changed, and there's going to be a bunch of cool updates involving the site, accounts, supporting, and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure it's all going to be happy and well received, but I've said that before and people were upset. So we'll see what happens. But, the short answer is the MP3 is as good as it's going to get for now if you want audio only. And in the future, there's a lot of stuff is going to be changing, and I hope for the better. Chris from Belgium was actually chiming into Arnliot's question over on Floatplane. Sorry I didn't see that in order, so I'm jumping around here. But Chris had a pretty good suggestion. He said he had previously had a JVC monitor, and it was in 16:9 mode, which meant everything was always kind of squished down for 4:3 content. So is it possible at all that the Barco monitor is doing that, even in a setting that you might have to dig into a menu to find? It didn't sound like it because it sounded like you said some sources actually worked, but it's a good suggestion from Chris, because with these old monitors, you never really know what setting has been changed before you got it. There were a few people that I'd heard get monitors before that were set to 16:9 mode, and since they were new, it took them a little while to figure out where the setting was to switch it back. But those were BVMs that have nice on-screen menus, so with that Barco, it might be a switch somewhere, it might be a button hidden underneath. So, it's a good suggestion and at least worth looking into. So, thanks, Chris. Raphael wanted to know if there's any standalone low-pass filter solution for RGB inputs. In their setup, they have an OSSC with the low-pass filter active, but sometimes they can't get rid of the video noise, and wonder if there's any cheap solution for that. First question from the channel, hugs from Brazil. What's up, man? Thank you very much, and I hope to visit Brazil soon. I've always wanted to. Smoke Monster lived there for a while. But anyway, so there's two answers to your question. The first is if you're getting noise through the OSSC, it's most likely other things. So the best thing to do would be take something like a Super Nintendo, which is known to be pretty clean, all things considered. Use the Firebrand X profile, set phase, and make, his profile has low pass filter on, and see if you still get noise. If you do, then I'm not really sure what it could be, but if it's something like a Sega Genesis that's not modded, you're probably always going to get noise because they're just inherently noisy consoles. And don't forget, too, that when you're scaling these 240p signals to 1080p, you're scaling the noise as well as the signal. So any little bit of noise that's probably barely noticeable on a CRT is going to be very noticeable on an OSSC. So don't just turn on the low pass filter. You could try setting it to 9 megahertz for classic consoles as opposed to auto. But don't just do that and use optimal timings and see if that helps. But to answer the other part of your question, is there a device that's just an external low-pass filter? Yes, the SCART cleaner thing I talked about for video capture. I used this the other day. I plan on making a video about this soon, but I'm hoping to get another revision or two out of this first. But the OSSC's VGA input does not have a low-pass filter attached to it. So if you wanted something like a second SCART input, you could use just a DVI adapter, because remember, this is just an output connector. This isn't a DVI signal, it's just analog output. So use a DVI to VGA connector, then use just a VGA coupler, and you could plug this directly into the VGA input of the OSSC, flip on the low pass filter you have here, and essentially what you have is now a second SCART input for your OSSC with an external low pass filter. So I don't think this is the solution in your case. I think it's more likely settings or just a noisy console, because that's what I've personally run into a lot. It could be something else just based on my experience. However, if anybody does want to add another low-pass filtered SCART input, this isn't nearly as complicated as it looks. Pick this up, the SCART cleaner, also called the SCART to DVI. I changed the name because too many people were convinced it was actually converting it to DVI. So pick up the SCART cleaner from Insurrection Industries, or make your own. It's an open source project. And then just get 2 dongle adapters, one DVI to VGA, and then either a VGA cable, or I just like to use these plug adapters so that there's no cables. That way it goes directly in and there's less chance of any analog signal being lost. So kind of a neat solution. Hopefully you can mess with some settings on your OSSC and get it tweaked. And if you still have issues, let me know specifically what consoles are worse, and I'll see if I can help out. Elmer M had a few questions. I might break up the answers just to make it easier, but number 1, they're interested in getting one of those Extron crosspoint matrix switches and want to know if I have any tips or advice on what to look out for. Yeah, a few things. So first of all, pay attention to the dimensions of these, because some of them are huge. Also, if you're getting some of the bigger ones, you might want to look into something that looks like a long screwdriver, but it's meant to take on or to screw in the BNC inputs, because you're not really going to be able to fit your fingers in there once all of these are connected. So you'll really need a tool to grab it and put it in for you. Also, check out how many inputs or outputs you want, because sometimes you'll see like 8x1 and you really wanted at least an 8x2. So make sure that you have pictures of both the front and back of each so you could count which one's which. Make sure that the consoles that you own that don't output C-Sync have some kind of sync stripper in the cable or some kind of solution. So for example, PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 as well don't output C-Sync natively. And you could do mods on both of them that will turn Luma into C-Sync, and then you just lose S-Video, which in my opinion is totally fine because you still have composite, and you still have, which is arguably the easiest to use in some situations. And then of course you still have RGB. And audio is the only last thing, which Joe Paley jumped in on as well, is not all have audio solutions. And some people prefer to use a separate audio switch, so that means you'd have to match up each one. You know, number 1 is Genesis on the Extron, and number 1 is also Genesis on the audio switch. Or find one with audio built in and get those Phoenix connectors that I think Retro Gaming Cables in the UK sells. It's an open source design, so you can make your own. So that's basically it. Also, the final thing is the output of all of these. Sync is always going to be TTL level. So if you output from an Extron crosspoint into any SCART device, there's got to be a resistor on that line to make sure that you don't send too much voltage to something like an OSSC. Otherwise, you could potentially blow it out. Next question, are WeDual HDMI kits still available? I don't know what the deal with that is. I think Dan might be making another run of those, but you probably want to ask him directly because he's, at least in the short term, he's pretty swamped with those GC loader orders. But you never know. And also remember the delays with everything in China lately. Even if he did want to do another run, it might be months before they arrived. Number 3, I saw a while back someone RGB modded a SpongeBob CRT. I have one of those kid cartoon themes. Do you think it's worth it to have someone RGB mod it, or just spend money on a PVM or BVM? So that is absolutely up to you. It's my personal opinion that if I had the space for it, I would collect CRTs and I would restore each one of them and RGB mod each one of them just for the hell of it. I have this little 9-inch Brian Vega Algold TV that just looks so cool even when it's off. So much like your cartoon themed TV, that might be kind of neat. And I also appreciate the way different CRTs look, both the sizes and the different shadow mask, aperture grill differences. So I would, if it's something that's important to you, I would do that and still keep your eyes open for a PVM or BVM because it looks totally different. But that's kind of extreme, and this is something that I really enjoy and love collecting. So you'll just have to decide how important this is to you, because many of us, even many hardcore RGB gamers, would listen to what I just said and go, oh, hell no, I'm not RGB modding and recapping this one and buying a PVM and eventually having to do that. You're crazy. They're CRTs. So just decide how much these mean to you. And lastly, are the new Voltar Duo RGB board revisions that much different than the older ones? Should I reswap boards if I already have the retired board? Well, I definitely don't want to speak for Voltar, and I don't think I would do any of his boards justice trying to talk about them. But as far as I can remember off the top of my head, I don't think he's ever had a board revision change that I felt required removing the old one and putting the new one in. I think all of his stuff's been great, and I think for the most part, his upgrades have been convenience-based. Redid it so that any sync cable will work. Redid it so that the wires were routed in a different way so you could use ribbon cable cleaner. I think a lot of his updates were just stuff like that. That it's very good that he continues to improve the design, but won't have any or very little impact on the final output signal. I can't quite remember 100% about the Duo RGB, but generally when it comes to Voltar stuff, that's been my opinion on it. But if you're really that curious, reach out to him and hopefully he'll respond. Rick wanted to know if I could recommend an HDMI switch which will automatically go to whichever input is turned on. The G-SCART switch will do this for SCART, but can I recommend an HDMI switch that you could plug the G-SCART switch to the FrameMeister to the HDMI switch and have it automatically detect it? Bad Reality says they use a Kenevo 501BN automatic switcher, and it says it's lagless, and Bad Reality says it's lagless, and it automatically switches 9 out of 10 times. For the 1 out of 10 times it doesn't pick up sync, and you could probably just fix it by power cycling and stuff like that. I'm paraphrasing Bad Reality. The response they wrote was much better than what I'm saying. I agree with all of that stuff. In my experience, I haven't had very good luck with automatic switching in HDMI. I haven't tried the Kenevo. I think that's how you say it, the Kenevo brand. So maybe Bad Reality found a hidden gem, if you will. But generally speaking, anytime you go full auto, something might trip it up. Like some device that's, even if there's no signal going to it, it's always outputting a signal, like the OSSC. It's stuff like that. So for me, I'm kind of forced to do anything manually, but I guess check out Bad Reality's suggestion and see if that works for you. And I'm glad you enjoy the drunk quote from last week. That it's a very true but also funny statement, is there's a time and place for being drunk. At a concert that you're Ubering or taking the train to, hell yeah. Get drunk, sing your face off, everybody's happier as a result. At a child's birthday party, maybe don't get drunk. Joe Paley was following up on a post from a few weeks ago asking about a noise in the 20L5 that they own, and turns out that there was an issue with the TV, and once a tech replaced one of the PCBs, the sound went away. I am so happy to hear that. honestly. It's just CRTs make a lot of different noises, and I'm so glad yours was something that was easily able to be fixed. I still have a few that when it turns on, it makes a really loud noise, but then they're not loud at all after they're powered on. So at some point, I might bother Jose to help me fix those and see what's going on. But at the moment, I think I'm pretty much going to leave them as is. But now that that's fixed, Joe's looking at getting a PC Engine CD. Mostly to play Rondo of Blood, and the Terra Onion SSD S3 looks like the easiest approach, but they're hearing a lot of quality issues. If I want to play CD games, is this the option I would suggest? Are there terrible AV quality issues fixed? Do I still need to mod the PC Engine to get rid of jail bars? Or do I wait until the Mr. PC Engine CD support arrives? So there's a lot of answers to that question. I'll skip to the end and say that everything Terra Onion shipped in the past year plus now, I think, has been pretty solid. The issues were mainly with Rev 1, which was only the very first batch, and then they had some with Rev 2, but in Rev 3, everything's great. I don't think you need to upgrade anything at all. Of course, anything with audio involved in it, you could always replace something with an audiophile grade whatever, but as far as just playing it and enjoying it goes, I don't think there's anything about the current SSD S3 that comes across as, when I play it, I don't think this could be better. I think, awesome, now I have all my games in one spot. But about modding the PC Engine to get rid of the jail bars, that's every PC Engine with every device you use that's analog video. So that's not related to the SSD S3, but luckily it's 2 capacitors that are fairly easy to replace. So if you've ever done surface mount, SMD component soldering, this is a breeze. If you haven't, it should be a fairly cheap mod. And this is one of these things where, you could replace the 2 surface mount caps, slap in an SSD S3, and get yourself a great solution. But to answer the rest of your questions, is this the best way to play CDs, or do I suggest getting an original, or do I suggest getting a Mister? That's really something that you're going to need to decide for yourself. My personal opinion on this, which a lot of people think I'm crazy for, I own a Mega CD that somebody was nice enough to donate, and Jose helped me. When I say help me, Jose rebuilt the entire thing pretty much. I have a couple of Sega CD games that are important to me. I loved Sonic CD as a kid. I got a copy of Double Switch, which I don't even like that game, but it's sealed, brand new. I like knowing that I own a few of these, and even though I don't consider myself a collector, it's important to me for whatever crazy reason that I still have that, and if I choose to have the original experience, I can. But then I choose to play on optical drive emulators most of the time because it's no fuss. It just works. You don't have to worry about disc rot, old lasers. I don't have to worry about taking out, in the rare occasion I have an expensive game, I don't have to worry about it. And at some point or another, I don't think in the near future, but in the far future, consoles are probably going to be that way too. Do I want to power on my Super Nintendo 30 years from now, when I'm old and have arthritis and could barely play anyway? Or do I want to use whatever Mister is available then, or plug into the Matrix or whatever, because, I don't want to worry about ruining the original thing. So it's, it really is what you're in the mood to do at that moment. The Mr. PC Engine support's been amazing. I haven't heard anything definitive about CD support, but I hope it's being worked on. So I would just choose the path that you think is best for you. A lot of people have a CRT setup with these original consoles unmodded, so they play NES and Composite, Super Nintendo and Genesis with RGB and all that stuff. And then they use a Mister on their flat screen because it's just no jail bars, everything's easier. And that way they choose between the original experience or just playing the game. I could probably talk for another hour about different combinations of stuff that you might be able to use that might fit your setup better. But this is really something where you just might want to take a long walk and daydream about this and figure out what's best for you. But if your goal is an original PC Engine playing CD games as fuss-free as possible, at the moment the SSD S3 is definitely the one to get. Joe Vassell had an awesome question that I do not know the answer to, but I really, really hope somebody listening will, because I'm just very curious about this. So I'm just going to read it straight through. I was curious if you know what the differences are in Sega CD BIOS versions, aside from the obvious splash screen differences in intro music. The reason I ask is that I was playing around with my Mega SG and my Mega SD, playing my favorite game, Lords of Thunder. On the Mega SD, on early versions of the CD BIOS, when you pick up gems from defeated enemies, the sound effect from your shooting clips out at the gem pickup sound. You have to stop shooting for about a second in order to restore the gem pickup cling. You can see this in the first level using fire armor. With later BIOS revisions, the gem sound does not clip out until the fire armor gets upgraded. Then once it's upgraded one level, the new shooting sound effect clips out the gem pickup sound. On the CDX BIOS, which is the latest as far as I could tell, the gem cling pickup sound never gets clipped out, even with fully upgraded armor. So the BIOS revisions must have something to do with audio, but I can't find any documentation regarding this. So this is always really interesting to me because I'm not at all a programmer, but I do know that when it comes to triggering certain things in game, whether it's a sound or a flash or whatever else, there are registers for that, and they might call on different things, or the BIOS might interpret that differently. So this is something that I would love to know the answer to, because it sounds to me like it might be one of those things where if you answer this, then it opens up a whole, oh, well, that explains that, and that explains the other thing. Once again, I'm not a programmer. I could be wrong, but if anybody knows the answer to that, please chime in, because that was a pretty interesting find, and I was really curious to see what that is. Dennis Downing is looking for technicians for servicing PVMs in the Chicago area or in general. It's a really hard thing to recommend because the people I know are swamped with work. They're spread out across the country, and no disrespect whatsoever to your question, but your average person that contacts these people doesn't realize how expensive it's going to be because they honestly don't realize how much work goes in. So very often they get a little surprised, and I'll get the few times I did get recommendations, I'll get emails back like, "You're crazy and your friend's crazy too. They want $500 for that." Like, yeah, that's like 3 full days worth of work and a lot of money in parts. So yes, that's a very fair price for, in that one situation, the extreme thing that needed to be done. So I don't like giving recommendations like that, both because everybody's swamped and because I don't want to get in the middle of things. But I guess I would just try to poke around on forums and see. There are definitely good techs out there. And you could try to learn yourself too. Just obviously anything CRT related, please be super careful about discharging. So sorry for the non-answer on that one. And also, which consoles currently have a digital audio mod but no HDMI mod? So I believe I had a list for this somewhere, but it's something like, I think you're specifically asking digital audio but not HDMI, because you could do digital audio on a GameCube, but that already has an HDMI mod done. So Sega Saturn, Super Nintendo, 3DO, there's a few more original PlayStation 1, certain models, but that's getting an HDMI mod soon anyway. So you could look that up and kind of figure it out. But if you have a specific console that you're looking to do, let me know, and I could see if I remember which mods were available. But there's quite a few, and I think a lot of them use the same sound chip, so it's the same mod in all of them as well, which is pretty handy. You're basically just tapping the digital signals, put it through a small circuit and out an output connector. So there's, if you have a good stereo, I find digital audio to be better in almost every case, simply because you don't have any ground noise or hum or anything like that. Using a Toastlink, SPDIF, whatever you want to call it, I found a huge difference with Super Nintendo for that reason. And, eventually when I got fully shielded coax cables and all that stuff, it's a lot harder to tell the difference. But if you're playing on a surround sound stereo, it picks up the details a lot more. So I totally understand why you'd want to do that. I guess I would just do a little bit of research, and if I don't have a page on the website for this, I will soon, because it seems like something that I should be letting people know about. Joe Vessel had another question about the Analog Pocket and wanted to know my opinion of what that brings to the table versus an original Nintendo DS and a backlit Game Boy Advance. What are my thoughts on it, and if it's worth purchasing if you already have those consoles? It's all down to form factor, screen, and money. and preference, I guess. So if you already have a GBA in the form factor that you love and it's backlit and you have an EverDrive, I don't know if there's a need to upgrade to the Pocket unless you specifically liked that form factor better, that screen better, and want the ability to plug it into a TV as well, which is pretty neat. DS Lite, obviously there's no DS emulation on the Analog Pocket, but you're also right in that you could use Game Boy games on that as well. So it would really just come down to, in my opinion, are you going to use those extra features that are involved? I don't prefer to game on handhelds. I don't even use my Switch in handheld mode. I don't know why. It's just kind of the way it is for me. So I probably won't be purchasing one, but that's the only reason, because it's not the form factor I want to play on, and I already have other alternatives for those. So it's really just going to come down to your own preference on this stuff. I understand your question. You were wondering if I knew some magic use for it that maybe they hadn't been advertising yet, or maybe some cool retro-related thing I could tie together. But honestly, form factor, screen, and if you want to play it on a TV is really the only things I could think of. So sorry, not much more to add on that. Jeremy Hopkins just picked up a Sony KV-20FS12 and wants to know how it compares to the JVC D series and the 32-inch PVM. To be honest, every one of these are going to look different. There's going to be a lower line count. There's going to be different ways to process it, different features and stuff. That's kind of why I'm so into, the thought of collecting CRTs. And I'd love to do an exhibit somewhere where you're seeing the same game on 10 different types of CRTs, so you could really see the difference, even if it's not something you'd notice if you left the room and came back. But if you're seeing them all next to each other, I think that would be cool. But I don't really have anything to add other than no consumer grade TV is ever going to be as sharp and as many lines as a BVM, but that doesn't mean they're better, or it doesn't mean they're worse either. It just means it's a different look. If that model, I believe, has component video inputs, and if that's 15 kilohertz only, so no 480p support, it should work exactly like the one I modded a while back, and it should totally work fine. The JVC D series is a curved tube, which supposedly has a high line count, so that's going to look like different than the flat tube. But they're two different types of tubes: shadow mask, aperture grille, the Trinitron style. So it's going to be a lot of weird differences. The only time I would come out and say here's an important difference is I think all of the Sony widescreen CRTs. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure all of the wide Sonys, the consumer grade ones, process everything as 1080i, which, to be honest, that's actually really awesome for 480i only games. So a lot of the PlayStation 2 library, I think pretty much all GameCube games could be forced to progressive scan. But, if you're stuck in a 480i only scenario, that's pretty neat. But it also adds like a frame or two of lag, and any of your content that's 240p is going to look terrible. So that's the only time I would really stop somebody from getting a CRT and say, hey, are you sure this is the one that you want? I had one of those widescreen Sonys. It was technically Scott's, and it ended up getting accidentally stolen from the old office. It's a long, weird story, but I wish I could have held on to that one, but I just wasn't able to. But that one was pretty cool, but that one definitely was going to need a recap. You could see different issues with it. So I guess the only comparison I would make between any CRTs is owning any CRT for retro gaming is better than no CRT, period, end of story. The condition of the CRT is going to make a giant difference. You might have to do some restoration and calibration, which can be a lot harder or easier on consumer TVs, depending. They usually have less caps, but they're harder to calibrate, etc. That's pretty much it. So, sorry if this is not the answer you were looking for, but I always try to be honest and realistic with this stuff, and that I love CRTs. I love gaming on them. But they're all going to look a little bit different. And, I don't think there is definitively a best one, because some people just might not like the look of certain ones over others. Bad Reality wanted to know about the Supergun Warning for the G-Comp and G-SCART switch. This is something I'm going to be doing a video on at some point in the future. I've been wanting to do it for a year now, called Supergun Safety. I also have a list of 50 other videos I want to do. But here's the short version. Superguns were originally designed for people by arcade experts for arcade experts is probably the easiest and most polite way to explain it. And then you take people who are starting to get into this stuff now because they didn't realize this existed before, and they're not experts, and they think because it has the same connector, it's compatible with everything. And I'm not blaming the user in this case at all, because how would somebody know if somebody didn't tell them? And I'm not necessarily blaming the manufacturers of these superguns, because some of them that were sold 10 plus years ago, there was no chance of somebody accidentally using it in a G-SCART because the G-SCART didn't exist. But the problem does exist in that the video levels, the sync levels, and the audio levels can all be so high out of spec for consumer devices that it destroys OSSEs and G-switches. There was one incident with one supergun manufacturer blaming everybody else instead of just saying the truth in that, hey, this is supposed to be for experts. If you don't know what you're doing, I'll put a sticker on it. Sorry for the trouble. That they chose to just blame everybody else, which was really annoying. It was really a bad way of handling things. So my suggestion for anybody using a supergun is to double and triple check everything. If you buy a brand new HAS, the home arcade system, you should be perfect no matter what it is. If you buy a used HAS, somebody could have modified that, even just jumper settings. So read the whole manual and double and triple check it. And if you're still unsure, ask somebody that is sure about it. As far as any other superguns, I've heard the Sentinel is very safe. There's a few new ones coming out that are meant for consoleizations that I've personally tested that are definitely safe. But generally speaking, most of them are not going to be. And the problem could very well be audio. So it's just the potentiometer volume knob is turned up too high and you'll blow out SCART equipment. So that's kind of the short version of it. That's also, sorry, I don't know if that horn picked up. That's also an explanation of why you might hear drama surrounding it because of that one manufacturer that just kind of blew it off. So hopefully that was a good short summary of everything. And I hope to detail all of this in a polite and well-presented manner in a supergun safety video, just to warn people of exactly what or how or why. But, generally anything brand new that's coming out these days, like, the HAS and the ones that I know of are going to be safe. It's just the older ones, and not necessarily the cheaper ones. Some very expensive ones have the same issue because, once again, they were designed to be used by arcade techs that understood how to change the voltages around and how to test with an oscilloscope if they needed to. So that's like the basic overview for you. Bradley Cooper says they've been working on getting their retro gaming set up to a point where they or anyone can just boot up any console and have them almost all be in RGB. The plan is to get the Rad2X cables for the Saturn, Genesis, and SNES, and would like to get the OSSC just for fun to play with the settings. Before purchasing the Rad2X cables, they wanted to clarify some information, though. On Twitter, they noticed a few people having issues with the N64 and Rad2X when running NTSC games on a PAL region unlocked console, with colors displaying incorrectly. Is this just a unique N64 issue? Yeah, I believe it is, and I believe that is the only scenario in which there's a problem. And I didn't really get it myself because there's a lot of factors that go into making that issue happen. So unless you're using that exact setup, a PAL region unlocked N64 running NTSC games, I wouldn't worry about it. You say you don't play any non-NTSC games on the Genesis or SNES, and would be doing this on the Saturn through both discs and eventually ROMs on the Satiator. People still keep correcting me, but I just like the way Satiator sounds. Is there anything I should consider or limitations to the Rad2X when dealing with games from different regions? I've tried a few scenarios like that, most specifically NTSC games on a PAL GameCube, so that you get the RGB output, RGB 240p output. My main concern for that was Game Boy interface, which I think looks great on a PAL GameCube through the Rad2X. But no, there's nothing else that I know about. It sounds like that's a really great setup as well. The only thing I could think of, though, is if you have a PlayStation, which I don't think you mentioned in this. PlayStation PlayStation 1 is the only issue. PlayStation 2, when the console's off, I believe the USB port's powered off, and that's fine. But if you're using a PlayStation 1 and you have a power connector to power the Rad2X, because remember, the PlayStation 1 and 2 are the only consoles that the Rad2X needs external power. If that's the case and you're using an automatic switch, technically that Rad2X would always be outputting signal as long as it was plugged into the wall. I'm pretty sure that's not the case with the PS2 because you could power it off the front USB, and I think when it's powered off, it's powered off. You might need to flip the switch and back, but that should be fine as well. So that would be the only thing I would remind you as a concern, is that if you're using an automatic HDMI switch and you have a PlayStation 1, it's probably going to always detect that as being on. Other than that, every other scenario you brought up, I think should be fine. And it's my opinion that if mixing region games is super, super important to you, depending on the console, it might just be cheaper and easier and better overall to get the second console. That's not for everybody. There's space and cost limitations. I totally get that. But for something that's still cheap, like a Sega Genesis, my personal opinion is I think I would rather just get a PAL Genesis rather than try to do a region mod on mine. And I think it's more cost effective that way. Just my opinion. Certainly not telling you what to do with the different regions and stuff like that. But yeah, PlayStation 1 console always, or the PlayStation 1 Rad2X always being on when plugged in, and mixing and matching regions are so far the only issues I've found, as well as some random Saturns are having issues. We're still trying to determine why. We think it's a voltage issue, which then might be linked to different problems in the Saturn, but it's very, very few. And it's one of those where if your Saturn has this problem, it's very unlikely, but you just got to chalk it up to, I got one of these, let's deal with the fix now. And but that's a very small percentage. But you asked what to worry about, and I just wanted to list everything I knew of. Bad Reality wanted to clarify the question from last week about signal conversions, and I think the short version is they want to know a way to play 6th gen 480p games on original hardware on a 4x3 VGA CRT without having to worry about aspect ratio distortion. I don't think you would need to worry about that. I think in the case of outputting 480p, you could just use basic converters. So for Xbox, you could just use a component video to VGA, or just get a VGA box, set it to 480p 4x3. For GameCube, same thing. You could either use like the Carby component or the Carby HDMI and convert it there. You might have better luck with a component just because it's still in the analog domain, but I think as long as your GameCube was set to 4x3, it wouldn't squish the image in. It certainly does not for the Xbox. It certainly doesn't for the Dreamcast, and I'm pretty positive it doesn't for the PlayStation 2 as well. The only issue you'd have to worry about with the PlayStation 2 is finding a solution that allows you to boot it in 480i and then switch to 480p. And I believe if you use the OSSC for that, in 480i mode, it would just line double to 480p 2x. And then in 480p mode, you could set it to pass through. And you would just need to make sure that the OSSC isn't set to 16:9 output modes. It's just set to standard 4x3. So I don't think that's an issue you'd really have to worry about. Are you specifically having an issue with any of this? And if so, let me know, and I could try to walk you through it, or see if I've had any experience with that specific setup. But I don't think that's going to be an issue, because those consoles that you mentioned have the ability to set, whether it's through the menu like Xbox or something like Swiss on the GameCube, you could set 4x3, 16:9, and you could just use converters that don't mess with the signal. They just do a signal conversion from component to VGA or something. So I think I answered your question, but if I'm still not getting it, please let me know, and my apologies if I missed it. Well, that was kind of a long one this week. I hope nobody minds. I try to always give each question the attention that they deserve, but if that might end up being an almost hour-long weekly thing, I guess just give your feedback on that. Am I doing okay? Do you want me to shorten up the answers so these things go a little bit smoother? Do you want more detail to each? Please, honestly, I just want to do whatever all of you want me to do, because this is a blast for me. I really enjoy doing it. Anyway, though, for people that are new to these Q&As, please ask any question you have wherever it is that you support in the latest Q&A post. The way these support services work, it's near impossible for me to figure out what question I already answered and what I didn't. And also, the YouTube videos are going to be changing soon. There's different things I'm going to be doing. I want to do all the changes at once so people don't have to relearn things, or click on different links every week. Hopefully in a couple months, there's just going to be one day where I launch a video and say, here's all these awesome changes. Here's how everything works now. But up until then, I need to leave the YouTube videos alone and have comments turned on for algorithm reasons, which seems to have been helping, by the way. But I don't read those comments and I don't respond to those. And I don't mean to be disrespectful about that. These Q&As are just a thank you to everybody that supports. And it's just something I love to do to interact with all the supporters. So by no means am I trying to be disrespectful by ignoring the comments on the YouTube video. It's just really something that's focused on supporters. I do try to help everywhere else as much as I can. I obviously don't have the time to answer everybody's question about everything, but I'm certainly not ignoring people. I try to get back to people on Twitter all the time and in other comments of other videos. So hopefully that's not been taken the wrong way. So far, no complaints, which is odd. But anyway, thank you all very much for your support, for your understanding, and for participating in these, because I do enjoy them very much. Thanks very much. I'll see you next week.